Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unpacking a literal David and Goliath scenario straight from the South African legal archives. We're looking at a fascinating 2005 judgment from the Constitutional Court of South Africa. The case, JPL Janse van Rensburg versus the Maluti-a-Phofung Municipality. On one side, you've got a powerful local municipality, and on the other, a completely unrepresented citizen taking his fight all the way to the absolute highest court in the land. So you're probably wondering, how on earth did a local dispute end up sitting right in front of the Chief Justice? Well, let's find out.
Have you ever been so unbelievably frustrated by a bureaucratic wall, or maybe a totally nightmare customer service experience, that you just threw your hands up and demanded to speak directly to the manager? I mean, we have all been there, right? You just want to bypass all the middle tiers, skip the automated menus, and go straight to the person at the very top who can actually make a final decision. Well, in the legal world, the ultimate manager is the Constitutional Court. And today we're looking at a case where a citizen tried to do exactly that. He tried to bypass the lower courts to speak directly to the highest judicial authority about a local property disagreement. But as we're going to see, the justice system doesn't exactly operate like your local retail store.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Every major legal showdown has an origin story, and this one begins with a highly relatable, ground-level dispute. It all kicked off when the Maluti-a-Phofung Municipality, which used to be known as Harrismith, decided not to renew a lease agreement. And this wasn't just any piece of property. It was initially rented to the applicant's mother, and both he and his mom had poured serious time and money into making improvements to it. Naturally, when the lease was terminated, a massive disagreement blew up over who was actually responsible for those improvements. Feeling totally wronged, the applicant took action and filed a claim in the Bloemfontein High Court. Up to this point, right, this is a perfectly standard local property dispute following the standard legal playbook.
Now, I want you to think about the number 0, because that is the exact number of lawyers the applicant, Mr. Janse van Rensburg, hired to represent him in this monumental legal battle. 0. He tackled this entire thing entirely without legal representation. He was a pure 100% DIY litigant. And actually, there's a really interesting detail in the court records. Mr. Janse van Rensburg was a chief engineer. So when you think about it, his mindset makes total sense. Engineers are literally professional problem solvers. They're highly analytical, they figure out the mechanics of complex systems, and they just fix things themselves. He clearly believed he could engineer his own way through the deeply layered complexities of the justice system just as effectively as a trained attorney would.
But here's the reality check. Navigating the courts without a lawyer? It's kind of like trying to defuse a bomb by reading a manual in a language you don't even speak. And that brings us to the painfully abrupt outcome of his initial local case. His claim was dismissed. But wait, it wasn't dismissed because he was necessarily wrong about the lease or the property improvements. No, it was dismissed simply because he failed to amend his particulars of claim in time. I mean, think about the pure, agonizing frustration of that moment. It's a classic procedural misstep. In the legal world, missing a deadline to update your paperwork can literally bring your entire case to a screeching halt. The actual merits of his argument weren't even the deciding factor here. The whole thing tanked over a simple paperwork deadline.
Stinging from this massive procedural defeat in the High Court, did Mr. Janse Rensburg throw in the towel? Absolutely not. Instead, he attempted a massive legal shortcut. He invoked Section 167(16)(a) of the Constitution. This is a provision for something called direct access. Now, to put this into perspective, direct access is a super rare legal mechanism. It's normally reserved for extreme, urgent constitutional crises. It basically exists so that if the very fabric of the nation's rights is at immediate risk, there is a way to act immediately. But he used it to apply directly to the Constitutional Court for relief from a mundane, local procedural dismissal. He was essentially saying to the system, well, the lower court kicked me out on the technicality, so I'm taking this all the way to the absolute top. He filed his application directly to a bench featuring some of the country's most brilliant legal minds, including Chief Justice Langa and Deputy Chief Justice Mozeneke.
So the big question is, how did these top-tier judges react to this incredibly bold direct approach? Did they just toss his files straight out the window? Actually, no. What's super striking in the official judgment is this specific line. They wrote, "It is clear that the applicant feels that he was unfairly treated by the respondent." I love this because it highlights the profound empathy of the court. You had 8 presiding justices of the Constitutional Court of South Africa looking at this DIY litigant's application, and they took a moment to acknowledge his genuine personal frustration. They literally saw the human being behind the messy paperwork and recognized the sheer grit he was putting into fighting his own battle. But as we're about to see, Empathy does not magically override the rigid rules of the law.
And this brilliantly illustrates the strict reality of the judicial system. The court's empathy was immediately followed by a rapid-fire list of fatal procedural errors. First, he simply didn't comply with the rules of the Constitutional Court. Second, he totally failed to explain why it was in the interests of justice for the court to grant him this ultra-special access. Third, he was asking for the exact same relief he wanted in the High Court, and it wasn't even fully clear that the High Court proceedings were totally finished. On top of all that, he hadn't shown that alternative options, like arbitration, were completely off the table. And finally, the big one. If he was mad about the High Court's decision, he should have noted an appeal to another, lower court first. It was just a complete cascade of procedural miscalculations.
You see, the court has consistently set an incredibly high bar for this specific legal shortcut. For direct access to be granted, two absolutely strict requirements must be met. One, it must be unequivocally in the interests of justice, and two, it must feature exceptional circumstances. It is an exceptionally difficult threshold to cross, pretty much requiring issues of deep national importance or extreme urgency. But when the judges looked at the applicant's case, absolutely no exceptional circumstances were demonstrated to justify hearing a local property matter at this stage in the absolute highest court. Without those specific circumstances, it fundamentally just wasn't in the interest of justice to grant him direct access.
All of this builds into a vital lesson for absolutely anyone interacting with the legal system. It all boils down to this golden rule. You cannot skip rungs on the legal ladder. Mr. Janse van Rensburg's application was officially dismissed by the Constitutional Court, creating a powerful cautionary tale for the rest of us. The justice system is built on a strict hierarchy for a really practical reason. You have to exhaust your local options like basic appeals or arbitration before you can escalate an issue upwards. Think about it. If every single citizen who missed a paperwork deadline in a local court could immediately demand an audience with the Chief Justice, the entire system would instantly collapse under the weight of its own caseload. That rigid structure, it's exactly what keeps the wheels of justice turning.
So, as we wrap up, I want to leave you with this question to chew on. If you hit a bureaucratic dead end, how would you navigate the system without skipping the rules? It is so incredibly tempting to want to jump straight to the top when we feel we've been wronged, just like our chief engineer tried to do back in 2005. But true problem solving, especially within the precise confines of the law, requires a ton of patience, absolute precision, and a deep, deep respect for the procedural ladder. You really do have to play by the rules of the game, no matter how frustrating they might feel at the time. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Definitely keep this case in your back pocket the next time you're tempted to ask to speak to the manager.